Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I have a pleasure to have as a guest Adriana Stein. Adriana, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful weather here in Eindhoven. It's quite sunny, and yeah, nothing to complain, being honest,
That's
because the weather is still good.
yeah, that's like complete opposite of Hamburg. It's always
Oh,
dark and rainy here, so hence why I
oh.
constantly struggle to get decent lighting. I actually have two lights on in here and the curtain open, and this is as light as it gets. It's just a very
And
dark
I have
city.
just the light from my window, what you can see.
Yeah.
Which is quite weird, just because normally, because I'm based in the Netherlands, right, and we are the number one kind of country when it comes to rainy weather. We are taking the lead.
Yep, yep.
So, but not today, right?
Yeah, I mean today it's just crazy here, but that's normal. This is normal. We get something like over 250 days of rain in Hamburg, so yeah, you just kind of accept it when you live here.
I know. Do you ride a bicycle as well?
No, not lately. I mean, it's kind of it's a struggle here because there's just so many cars and things, and you
You
see people
don't
nearly
have
get hit.
separate roads for bicycles, right, like we have.
Sometimes, but it's not very safe. I mean, I even was out walking earlier today and I saw a biker nearly get hit by a car, and that's why I was like, yep, that's why
Oh.
I don't bike because I see it constantly. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that is not good. I asked about bicycles just because, here is just kind of normally it rains very
Yeah.
heavily and you're riding a bicycle.
Yep,
And,
yep.
a lot of Dutch people, what they tell you, right, you are not made of sugar.
Yeah,
Here, the
that's
favorite
actually
kind of
yeah,
word.
it's a saying in German too.
Yeah,
Wir sind nicht
well, I
auf
could
Suche.
relate.
Yeah,
I could relate.
yeah.
So, guys, we'd love to welcome you to the 16th episode of SERPs of the Week, where we discuss what's going on in search engine results, what kind of strategies you can use, right, to reach better rankings, to attract more organic traffic, and so on. I have a pleasure to introduce our guest, Adriana Stein. She is the CEO and founder of the agency called AS Marketing. She leads a team of digital marketing experts who deliver holistic online marketing strategies for both B2B and B2C companies across Europe and North America. So welcome one more time to our show, Adriana. It's a huge pleasure to have you here. And I'd love to talk today is about international ISO, right? Because you are based in Hamburg, right? So
Yeah.
most probably you might have quite a lot of clients from Germany that love to go international, right? And across the Europe, right? Obviously. And right, so I just want to learn more, and our listeners also want to learn more about what are the biggest challenges, right? What you need to know, right? Some basic steps, not to fail, right? From the very beginning, at least, right?
Yeah.
Your international so journey, right? So
Yep.
yeah, okay. So let's start with, some basic stuff, most probably, right? So, maybe the most, the most common either mistakes or misconceptions that you hear.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think one thing that's important to note, so we at AS Marketing, we specialize in international SEO and particularly localization. And so you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned supporting clients in Germany. Actually, it's the other way around. So we mainly
Mm.
support clients from outside of Germany or even outside of Europe to come into Europe and to come into
Oh, that is very
particularly
challenging
Germany.
because I know the German market is very closed market, right? They have,
Yes, yes,
certain leaders, and people in Germany, they kind of tend to lean towards their local brands. So
yes,
that is very interesting, right? To hear how you kind of can actually overcome those, this type of mindset, right?
absolutely. And so I think that goes into what you asked originally. What are some of the most common like and misunderstandings maybe in the beginning? And it goes along these lines that first, Germany, and I would say the EU and any country in general is different from another. So that's, I think, actually the biggest sort of misconception is a lot of companies think that, okay, you know, we've saturated the US or we saturated the UK or, you know, global English or whatever. Let's just copy paste what we're doing there. And now we're just going to expand into Germany and France and, you know, whatever other.
And Austria, right? Because Germany and Austria, they're not the same, even though they speak German language, but it's not the same German language, right?
Yeah, so that's true. There's the DACH region, which is the German-speaking region, so Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. And they also have their own nuances that are separate from Germany as well. It's Switzerland in particular because they speak also their French, Italian, Swiss German, and some other dialects. And so there are just so many differences, and I think that's the first thing to really understand is it's not a copy paste job when you're trying to expand into a new market, regardless of the channel, regardless of whether you're doing SEO, PPC. You have to really focus on localization. So it's not enough to just go and like mass translate your website and then automatically think, okay, we're expanding now. Like where are the sales? Where are the conversions? Where are the leads? Like, shouldn't they automatically come? Well, no, it's a completely different market.
Something about localization, right? Just because in my understanding, right, there are two different things, like translation, right, which is actually translating what's written in English to the Dutch language, to the German language, right? And localization, what's the biggest difference, right? Because a lot of people, right, they tend to, you know, not really understand quite well what does it mean, localization in a nutshell.
Yeah, so translation is sort of like, if you think about when you go into another country and you don't speak the language and then you use Google Translate to ask someone, where is the restroom? Or where can I find the next train station or something like this? Like, this is kind of the concept of translation, just basically going from one language to another. And in that context, it makes sense. You don't need some big in-depth, you know, monologue about how can I find this or that in that other language. You just want to be basically understood. But in the terms of marketing and wanting to really grow your visibility and your presence in a new market, then you have to go quite a big step further. And that's where localization comes in. So that's where you really deeply look at how do we maybe need to adapt our brand to resonate with this local market, our messaging style, our tone of voice, because the buyer journey is going to be different. I can say for sure the buyer journey in Germany is totally different from that in the US or the UK, for example. The pain points are different. So things you need to address are different. The social proof you need is different. And then, of course, you need to apply all of those channel tactics as well. So in terms of SEO, that's most importantly localizing your keywords and then localizing your strategy based on that, localizing your content based on what you find within that local search world, which has a lot of nuances. Like you mentioned, the local competitors that customers in that market tend to choose already that they know of, and you have to look at your competitors on a completely different level.
So doing comparison, right, with their products, if it makes sense, right, and just kind of, right, and then basically whenever you enter a new market and you have very little understanding of your competition, right, you might know some quite big brands, right? Let's say Amazon, right? If you're in the e-commerce space, most probably that will be Amazon if they are present in the particular country. But then, right, if you go down the funnel, right, and if you are looking for more, right, smaller competitors, especially if you are talking about some geo-targeted ones, right, that are working in a particular area, right, or something like that, I just wonder, right, if there is any specific service that you provide behind this, or if there is any other, because I'm not really familiar, right, with this topic. So I'm just kind of trying to understand, right, and our listeners will benefit from that. So what will be the best way to approach this without spending sleepless nights, obviously, right? And trying to kind of decode the search engine results, building up some kind of, mapping, whatever it is, kind of scraping all keyword and trying to understand, some kind of, connections and so on.
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to really just to start diving into the local search that you have within that market is to start Googling the phrases that you want to appear for in your original language. And then first you can start out with like a Google Translate version of that keyword, because you have to start somewhere. Maybe you don't know how that phrase is used in that language.
Yeah, exactly. I've been recently looking for a table, and I don't really speak Dutch much. That was a challenge because I wanted, a working table, right? That are kind of, the particular one, and that was quite hard to basically describe it in Dutch, which is a real pain, right? To put it in the right way to get the right results.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
It's not easy at all, I have to say.
Yeah, and that's that's where you have to start, especially if you don't work with someone who speaks that language natively, or you're just kind of doing some initial market research. But from there, what you'll start to find is what the local competitors are, what they tend to show up for, and ideally you should be expanding your keyword research from those translated phrases to actually find what the market searches for. So most of the time, if you do a word for word translation in e-commerce, it can kind of work, but in B2B, it really you really shouldn't do any of that, because it's not going to have search volume, especially languages like French, German, the Nordic region. We do a lot of projects within the Nordic region, and those languages, like, things are just phrased so differently that you really have to do your own keyword research based on that. But you can start to get an idea by, you've just translated one thing, and then you can put that into your SEO tool and look at things like broad match and phrase match, and look at what their search volume for. Google those phrases, look at the SERPs that come up. They may be phrased differently within that local language, but Google has a pretty good semantic understanding, so it can kind of get an idea of what might be connected to what you're trying to say, and then you can look at how it's phrased within those local SERPs as well, and get an idea of, okay, maybe this is how it's phrased instead. We had a recent project where it involved the IT industry and a company from the US wanting to expand into German. And this was quite an interesting exercise for this particular topic, because we found that they actually use a lot of Danglish, which is like a combination of English and German. And so we found a lot of search terms very commonly used with even higher search volume than purely in English in Danglish. So it was like these combination kind of phrases. And so we've built a lot of the strategy based on that, because that's how people are actually phrasing it within German. So that's how you have to kind of go through that process to understand what are people actually searching for, how do they actually phrase things, to really understand then, okay, how do I make sure my content is like understandable for that market, but then you also have the best chance of actually showing up in the SERPs, because it's phrased properly and it's got enough search volume.
I just wonder, right, if, might it be a small walk around if you kind of, if you have for sure the right budget, hiring someone to do some consultancy work from, the particular niche that you are interested in, and that is actually, kind of, native speaker in this niche, right? And that used to have the successful record track of working for similar companies or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the most of the time where a team like mine would come in, where we can help you with the native speaker, and we have experience with the nuances of that particular market. Like I mentioned, the customer journey or the buyer journey is so different from market to market. That's another really huge piece of this that always has to be considered. And that's what you probably wouldn't find out without actually talking to a person who understands that language and that culture. Because if you just look at it from like a top-down research level,
Yeah.
you're going to get some data, but you're probably not going to get like the human element of it, and you need
The
the element
cultural
of it
difference, which
too.
is very important, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you're right, in the Netherlands, I'm not pretty sure how things work in Germany, because I recently had, well, basically I need to buy a car, right? And I want to buy it straight away. And I want to buy actually a German car because I'm in love with the BMW, right? And I
Nice.
found the car in stock, right? Exactly the one that I want. And so, in the right color, in the right completion, everything is just perfect, right? And it's not really in a dealership nearby me. It's in a different city nearby me, right? Kind of 40 minutes. So I just first of all, I left an inquiry on the website, and it happened on Thursday. For sure, the website is not translated to English, right? Because it's a local dealership and so on. So they don't really translate anything, which is fine, right? Google Translate works well. I left my inquiry. I waited Friday. I waited, I think, the half of Monday. No one called me back. So I called directly to a dealership. It turned out that they can't connect with someone right at that moment with a sales representative just because they have a meeting. I asked them politely whether there is any chance they can call me back. They told me no, I have to call them, from my side. Now, finally, I was lucky enough to have a human touch, a human connection with someone from the salon and so on. So the story doesn't end there just because I basically right. That is their new logo, by the way. I really love their new logo because they rebranded it. It used to be a bit different. It used to be with
nice.
the red one, right? And right now it's more flat, and I love it. It's just very stylish. And they changed the font. But anyway, right? So circling back to my problem, right? So finally connected. I told him, like, look, do you have this car? It's available. He was like, yeah, very good car available. I was like, look, I want to buy it. He was like, do you want to make an appointment? I told him, like, look, I don't want to make an appointment just because I used to have the same car, exactly the same car in Cyprus. But because I relocated to the Netherlands, I had to sell this car, right? Because it's on an island, it's very expensive to bring the car. On top of that, they drive it right hand. So it's not going to work here, right? So I just okay. He was like, yeah, sounds good. I'll get back to you. For 2 days, I was waiting for his coming back. Nothing happened. I think not really 2 days, but almost 2 days, I would say. Yesterday, I decided to call him. He was not available. He messaged me that he's not available. But finally, we reconnected closer to the end of the day. And he was so nice to kind of schedule an appointment. So now I have to come to their dealership center, right? And kind of meet face to face, and hopefully I can close this deal. I guess in the US, if I tell this story, right, and you used to live in the US, that will sound very ridiculous, right? I'm not pretty sure how it's going to match the German reality, right? But here's how we live.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really perfect example of how things just function differently. So it's that what you had is not an abnormal experience. It's really there in Germany. There's not really a concept of customer service. It's more like you kind of have to, if you want to buy something, especially a larger purchase, you have to kind of like fight to buy it. Like
you have to close your deal on your own, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a totally different mindset from in the US where, we want to sell, we want to,
we will
give
follow
everything
up,
fast,
we will
fast.
stand nearby your door, right?
Exactly. Like everything is like right in your face, which I think is like too far on the other end as well. So
which is not so nice if you start being a part of those, sales cycles. But for sure, if you express even a tiny interest, you will be bombarded, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes,
absolutely. You will be bombarded. Due to all those commissions and how, the business and the market is shaped, right? Everyone is just kind of, trying to close the deal as soon as possible, right? So, the deal itself is kind of, the earlier it's closed, the better.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But here it's kind of like I'm gonna take my time. I don't have pressure, to make this happen. If it takes longer, this is actually when people when clients ask about what are the major differences between Germany and the US, especially in B2B, it's the lengthened sales cycle because of exactly
Mm-hmm.
what you are describing. People just take a lot longer to do things and to make decisions, and they're prioritizing their life outside of work, which kudos to them. I've
Yeah.
learned a lot about work-life balance here because of that, I must say.
Yeah, that is very important. I really love, I really love the pace of the life, right? Being focused on not only on kind of earning money, right, but also on spending your life in
Yeah,
the best way, right, in the more meaningful way, which is very important, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
fulfilling your life with something else besides, business, your business besides,
yeah,
making money and so on. So not being on that real pressure, right? Which
yeah,
is great, but for sure it comes also with some pros and cons as always.
yeah.
By the way, I wanted to ask something, just because I wanted to ask something about, I think, the cultural difference. How, by the way, when it comes to the cultural difference, right? Just because some people, they have a certain level of tolerance, if you know what I mean. They've been traveling a lot, but I know that if you kind of help people from the US expand into European market, let's say, then most probably you face a lot of challenges with explaining things, just because people in the US, they don't really travel much outside of the US, right? So they
Yeah.
don't really have a very in-depth understanding, right, of how things are shaped here, right, and what kind of values, right, people in Europe have. Because one more time, when it comes to the deals and the workflow, right, and the way people look at things, there is a big difference, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this just goes along with like explaining this concept of you can't just copy paste, one like mass global strategy and then expect it to work here. A lot of people say like, "Oh, I want to expand into Europe." Okay, well, great, but that's like 50
What kind of
countries.
country? Could you please specify, right?
So, I mean, who all have different languages and completely different cultures. I mean, I think I can understand, when you haven't traveled before. I traveled here, I also had no concept of how different things were here, but they really are completely different. I remember
Oh,
even my
if
first
you've gone to
time.
Italy, especially to the south of Italy,
Yes,
and then you will be
it's
back to the
so.
Netherlands, you know?
Yeah, it's completely different. And I remember even my first time in Switzerland, and my husband had convinced me to go there because I was like, oh, but it's the same as Germany. Like, why do I need to go to Switzerland? And he was
No.
like, no, 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 it's totally different. And yeah, and so we went, and now I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So I mean, it's so these things are new to someone when you're not familiar with how things are. So yeah, it is definitely one of the main things that we're kind of helping clients with, to understand how to set priorities in terms of the market. Probably not focusing on expanding into Europe, but maybe expanding into like the DACH region or the Nordic region, or maybe Germany and France. Those are kind of the typical like starting points, I would say, because they have the biggest economies. But again, it depends on your product, because we've also had a client in the past that was expanding largely in Eastern Europe, because the product just resonated a lot more with those markets. So when you have that
Mm-hmm.
idea, and can kind of narrow it down, then you can look at, okay, where are the markets that are the most worthwhile in terms of like the audience understands my product. It's not going to be totally new to them. So I don't have to explain something from zero. Because if you have to do that, then it's really a whole lot harder, which actually goes down to
Yeah.
product market fit. This is another really common issue we see as well, when trying to expand, especially in SaaS, because maybe that concept or that problem in one market doesn't exist in the new market. We had, this was a while back, but there was a company who sold some kind of software for organizing waste management. And it was
okay,
very,
that is relevant for us.
Yeah, it was very effective.
Do you also put plastic and the rest of other things, so you kind of sort things out as well, right? You put them.
Yes,
okay.
but it
so
was
you're
more
with
for
us.
like this. It was more for like the city though. So it was like how the city could kind of plan this sort of thing. And the funny thing was, so this company was very successful in the U.S. And we were trying to help them expand into Germany, and we were having a lot of trouble with conversions. And so we actually did a survey on the website about, how do you handle waste management in this context? What tool are you using? And like 95% of the survey participants said spreadsheets. They don't need anything else. That's it. And so it made sense because there was no pain point for them. So why would they pay for something when they've already got something for free that works just
they
as
might pay for advanced spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but this is,
advanced level spreadsheets is kind of, colorful ones with beautiful layouts, so they can kind of continue using the same, kind of infrastructure without re-educating themselves, just kind of, take it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the thing. So you have to set priorities. You have to really establish that you have product market fit. And actually, these things even come before you do SEO. Sometimes companies just kind of get that really turned around. Maybe they've even got like their whole website mass translated, and then it later on, like, there's no product market fit, and it's like, maybe you should have checked that before, like, diving into.
You know what? It's in our DNA to assume that everyone around us that we know more or less have the same needs and the same priorities.
Yes.
That type of, it's kind of, I understand why it saves a lot of time, right, for your brain, because whenever you do those aggregations, I would say, right, it helps you kind of not spend too much energy, right, on kind of diving into details and so on. But in reality, right, it's not like that at all. By the way, I noticed, right, since we work quite a lot with content, right, I mean, like, because our client, they come to us and ask to build links to specific pages, we noted that this kind of attitude, based on assumptions and I know better, is also quite popular among content marketers when they write things based on their own experience rather than asking people around, their end users.
Yeah.
And that is very funny, just because, in the majority of cases, even though you might be a great content marketer, you are not really an end user. So you don't really have the same scope of problems and the same mentality, which is very important, right, as your user. So knowing better is kind of one of the biggest challenges that you need to overcome, right? And that is something that I try to fight in myself whenever I try to also, make a kind of, these collective decisions in terms of kind of saying, I know this group, and so they kind of have this. And sometimes whenever I kind of, and this is what kind of immediately comes to your mind, sadly, right? It's just the same as judging by appearance. Sadly, the brain works in a different way, even though you always tell yourself, stop doing that, please, because it's just kind of not matching the new society standards. Your brain is operating in a different way, just based on the previous historical trends. And it's just not because of you, it's just because of, evolution thing, right? Yeah. So you can't say like, it's just because of me. That is, you have to remember about evolution. But anyway, right? So kind of saying, this group of people, that group of people, kind of sharing the same the same pains, or they have the same need, the same type of needs. Is just kind of what we do, right, on a general note.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, what you've just described perfectly is anthropology, which is what I studied.
Oh,
Yeah, which
really?
is
You have a
yeah.
degree?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
I actually
very
have three of
nice.
them, but anthropology was my favorite by far. So
I
yeah,
know, because I love also thinking about that, because a lot of things that nowadays people are talking about and trying to turn around, I would say, is not really true, just because something they were established thousands of years ago.
yeah,
So that is the
yeah,
problem, right? It's
yeah.
not
Of
really
course.
just because you are not kind of the problem of tolerance, for instance. That is something that happened thousands of years ago. It's kind of, for sure, we need to adapt to the new society rules and so on. But a lot of things that are kind of happening, they're happening due to this historical track.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, humans are wired to think that everyone is the same, because we're in our own heads and we think that everyone thinks the same as us. But people are super different, and so I think what you mentioned too, this making sure to write for your audience and not for yourself. I think
Yeah.
this is a very common issue, especially in B2B, and then it even goes further
Oh.
actually when B2B is expanding into new markets. Again, you can't just copy paste something that has originally been done and then
No.
just apply it, the same way for other markets. And so you do need to
Yeah, for
really
sure, because the
understand.
language should be the same, the values are
Yeah,
one more time, right? Being
yeah,
so push as your naturally are in for the US market is not going to work for European guys, just because
yeah,
they wanna have a completely different one more time mindset from other side, cultural kind of background, and they need the same messaging structured in a completely different way.
yep, absolutely. It has to all be.
Yeah, Adriana. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you.
I was just gonna say, it has to really be at the forefront to really understand your target audience and really try to speak to your customer as much as you can. And that really goes, especially for, localization as well. So if you do have current customers in a new market, even just one, ask them, why, what was that experience for you like?
Yeah,
What problems,
interview them for sure.
take time to interview them if you can. And if you don't have any current clients, then maybe you can interview someone else within that industry and just get their thoughts on how does this work within this market and within this industry. How do you feel about this thing or that thing? And that's going to give you a huge amount of insight into how things within that local market work. So really it's a matter of just making sure that you understand that audience locally, localize your target audience, understanding your competitors, and then of course your SEO strategy within the keywords and within the content itself. And so that's, even though it's more effort of course than like a mass translation, it's worth it because that's actually what's going to engage and convert people in the end. So at the end of the day,
Yeah,
where the real money
absolutely.
is.
Yeah, I think it's quite important to actually, before making any, putting down any SEO strategy, right, to kind of make sure that your product is a fit, first of all, right? Then most probably interviewing the current or potential audience. If you have someone, for instance, from Germany or from the Netherlands, that actually currently among your clients, right, even though you don't really have a translated version, you have maybe users that are coming from these countries, so it's making sense to connect with them. And maybe even it might be a good idea to participate at any local conference, right? So
Yeah,
you can come actually there, right? And that is not a huge investment compared to setting up an SEO strategy and localization, doing localization, investing in expanding, right? Your kind of your current company, maybe opening new branches and so on, right? Before you're going to do so, or kind of even if you plan just to ship your goods, still, right, it requires an effort. right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that might be a good idea as well. Adriana, to sum this up, right? The most important thing, right, that you want our listeners to take away from our conversation.
Yeah, I I would say go local. I mean, just think a whole lot further than just translation. Go local as much as you can with everything, with how you handle operations, with how you handle marketing, with how you handle sales, and that's really going to get you a whole lot further within that new market for sure than just a copy paste thing that probably is not going to have a whole lot of results.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Adriana, for joining us today. It was a pleasure to talk with you and wishing you a very nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.